Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Ibby reps NJ. With the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? It's real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Til Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Til Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Baseball is back. John Saponaro with each and every single one of you from Burbank, California. And that means that my co-host, Matt Ibanez, holding things down back in New Jersey. Ibby, before I ask you how you're doing, the one thing I will notice is that you and I are dressed very similarly today in terms of the hat and the hoodie, which tells you all you need to know about the weather here in Southern California. So I cannot rub it in. We are due for our worst rainstorm in about a year. So, I can't tell you everything is great and the sun is shining. I, like you, am thrilled that football is over. Baseball is back. Spring training is underway. But all that said, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic, John. And yes, from the hoodie, it's been rough over here in Jersey. We talk about ice storms. I had a delayed opening again today because of the snow that fell last night. And I too also took a bit of a spill this morning as I was trying to clean everything. I'm okay. Might be on the 10-day. I don't know. But either way, I'm doing fine. And I'm happy that the Mets and spring training is around the corner and pitchers and catchers have reported. We can start talking about some actual baseball, not getting lost in conjecture and rumor and this and speculation and that. We can speculate on some things when it comes to this roster and some things that we think that might happen moving forward with the actual team. And we'll talk more about David Stearns and all that stuff that went on today. But I'm happy that actual baseball is being played. Yes, it's guys playing in shorts. Yes, it's taking BP. It's hanging out in the backfields. But I don't care because, as you said previously, when it comes to someone like me in Jersey, in the cold, in the snow, seeing this does give me that hint of spring. Lets me know that the good weather is around the corner and that baseball is actually back. So I'm pumped up. I'm excited. The room's starting to fill up. I'm ready. It's Wednesday. The red light's on. Let's have some fun.
Let's have some fun. And, like Douglas Barnes said, like I said, like you said, baseball is back, ! LGM, ! I think that's going to be the tenor of this show. Like you said, there's a lot of stuff that we talked about for months and months and months, whether it was the Pete Alonso stuff and, going back further, there was the way, the Juan Soto situation was so fluid. And, we talked about all this offseason stuff. And I think one of the biggest things that we can look forward to in this particular episode as we get underway live on YouTube, live on Twitter, of course, subscribe to the channel, like the video if you are here. If you subscribe, you can become a full-fledged participant in the comment section as well. But I think maybe the biggest thing is we've now had back-to-back days where we hear from the manager, we hear from Carlos Mendoza. A couple of moments ago, we hear from the GM, the president of baseball operations, I should say, David Stearns. And so now we know that what we all thought, really, barring something crazy unforeseen. And we talked about this a little bit at the end of last week's show where, let's say the San Diego Padres get crazy desperate and have this fire sale, maybe the Mets can re-engage on Michael King or a Dylan Cease or something, but that doesn't seem super likely at the moment. So what we hear from the manager and from the president of baseball ops in the last 2 days is that this is the team. And yes, there's a couple open spots on the 26-man roster. There's a couple things they want to keep fluid. We can dive into each one of those things in particular coming up, throughout the show. But now we can finally set our sights on going from hitting in shorts and t-shirts, like you said, to playing spring training games, to seeing what some of these guys have, whether it's an up-and-coming player like Luis Angel Acuna, whether it's an up-and-coming player trying to reestablish value like Brett Beatty, or whether it's a player who's had a lot of time in the major leagues, but not a lot of success in particular areas like a Nick Madrigal. We're going to start to see the edges of this roster shake into place. And I think it's not maybe quite as fun as the start of the offseason when speculation runs rampant and everybody gets to play GM. That's always fun. But like I said last week, and like I said, and you said on our special Pete Alonso show, that stuff had kind of become stale. So I'm looking forward to the next phase of the offseason as we turn the page into the preseason. So I'm excited to talk about baseball. I don't care if it's Jesse Winker wearing shorts. I don't care if it's, the guys holding up their little placards like their first day of school stuff. The team has already started to report. Pitchers and catchers are there in the next couple days. Anybody who's not there yet will be there. And it's a cool time to be a baseball fan, especially if you're like me and you're not really a hockey fan and you're not really a basketball fan. When the NFL is in the rearview mirror after the Super Bowl, all of my focus turns immediately to baseball. Like I said last week, I'm not a college basketball guy. So, not even March Madness carries the day. From this point on, I am fully focused on Mets baseball and Mets baseball exclusively. And I love that. I've waited for that every single year since I was a little kid. And you know what? Now that I'm not such a little kid anymore, I still look forward to it every single year. And it never, ever, ever, ever gets old.
Baseball always keeps us a kid at heart, regardless of how old we get. So, yes, the love for the game continues to carry for both of us, obviously. And I'm with you. I'm not that big into basketball. Never was really that big into hockey. Football's over. My team's been done for a while, as has yours. So obviously being able to finally get into the nitty-gritty like we always do. We're here all year. We take a couple of weeks off here and there, but we're always here talking about our team because we love it. And now we're going to finally get a chance to start getting a better idea, a better scope, as I put in the description for this show, of what this 2025 team can be. It's about leaving 2024 behind us. As fun as it was fantastic. It's memorable. We'll never forget it, but it's time to look forward and break things down about what can be for this team in the coming year.
Absolutely. Shout out to everybody in the chat. We'll do our quick roll call from the people who jumped in right before we started and as we kicked off the show. We got Brad in the house. We got Charlie back in the live show. Welcome back to Charlie. I think it's been a couple weeks since Charlie's joined us as far as the live is concerned. I know he's been tuning in either on the audio side, and of course this drops as an audio podcast tomorrow, or has been watching the replay, which anybody can do if you're subscribed to the channel. We got D. We have Douglas Barnes, who I already mentioned. We got Edward Wall. We got Rosie in the house. We have Jeff Cohen, Truman Quinn. Let's see. Aaron Manning. What up, Aaron Manning? Jeff Cohen is here. Odd Villain making a return. Nice to see Odd Villain here as well. I don't want to miss anybody. We got Sydney. We got Carson. What up, Carson? Shout out to the Mets Weekly crew. Andre, Carlos Ortiz, Carlos Ramos, GSD over on Twitter. Everybody, I'm sure that's going to continue to fill up with more folks along the way. Ibby, I want to start with this one from the comments. And I think this week is going to be a little comment heavy just because I think people are going to be thinking the same sort of things that we're thinking. And I'd rather shout out these folks and allow their voices to be heard to kind of guide the conversation. I think this is not the biggest thing necessarily from a team building standpoint to start with, but I do think in the heart of a lot of Mets fans, this is a big thing to start with. So let's set it off with Andre, who's saying, so long, Jose Iglesias. Based on the comments from David Stearns today, And a little bit the comments from you, Carlos Mendoza, the manager, yesterday. He kind of alluded to the fact, that's Carlos Mendoza, that this team was not going to bring in another veteran infielder, another veteran presence. And so it seemed to signal the end for Jose Iglesias, and David Stearns all but confirmed that. And look, you just kind of said it. Leaving 2024, although it was great in the past, and turning the page to 2025. And I know some people watching this right now, some people listening to this later on tomorrow, they're going to be upset when I say this, but I'm going to remain steadfast in what I said all off season long, now into the preseason. Sometimes the best part about catching lightning in a bottle, the smartest part, is knowing when to take the bottle cap off and releasing that lightning again. Jose Iglesias was wonderful for this team. You could argue that he was the catalyst that changed the tenor and the culture of this team in 2024 and helped boost them, not only with his play on the field, but specifically how he brought the clubhouse together, behind the scenes and for all of us to see. It was tremendous. I will never forget it. We had J-Mac Customs on this show, creator of the OMG sign. There was so much goodwill about Jose Iglesias, and I truly hope that he is able to continue his big league career somewhere. I hope that he doesn't have to go through what he went through to get to the Mets last year in the first place. I hope that he can get a big league job somewhere. But I think this is the right move. I don't think you need to. We talked about the 26-man roster last week, and we're going to talk about it a lot this week. If you sign Jose Iglesias, that all but confirms that somebody's going down. Luis Angel Acuna, regardless of how good the spring is, he's going down. Brett Beatty, regardless of how good the spring is, he's going down. So it's not even just any one person's connection or affinity for one prospect, let's say. You on this show like Brett Beatty more than I do. But it's not just about Brett Beatty. It's not just about Luis Angel Acuna. It's not just about, oh my God, both of those guys were bad, but look at the spring Jet Williams had. Does he have a dark horse chance to make this team? All of that goes out the window if you sign another guaranteed contract for a player, a quote unquote everyday player, a position player, without moving a guy like a Starling Marte or whatever the case may be, a Jeff McNeil. And it seems like as much as the Mets tried to move Starling Marte, as much as the Mets tried maybe in vain to move Jeff McNeil, neither one of those guys is really movable right now. And so that means that if you're a Jose Iglesias fan, unfortunately, the Mets just don't have the room. And I don't think, even if it's a small deal, few $1,000,000 guaranteed, I don't think it's worth it to this team as they are currently constituted. Luis Angel Acuna is 22, 23 years old. And I'm not saying he's the second coming of his brother, but there's no reason why he cannot be your bench piece that also is able to continue to develop as a potential everyday player at a young age, getting at bats at second, at bats at shortstop, at bats at third, and maybe even at bats in center field. You don't need to roster a guy like Jose Iglesias. So thank you for OMG, but I think this is the right move. And, we'll get your take. And while you're going off, I'll take a look at the comments and see if people disagree.
I think it is the right call. And I've always said that I trust David Stearns when it comes to these types of calls. And he's the one who has, I don't want to say it's like he's calloused or anything like that, just to be able to cut through. But I do trust that he's someone that's able to take emotion out of things and do the proper thing for the team moving forward. And I'm with you. I appreciate everything that Jose Iglesias did. I agree that him coming up sparked this team, the song, the concert, the overall play, the way he hit with runners in scoring position, like the defense he provided, just the overall vibes. And it was incredible. It was fantastic. And I've said throughout the offseason, like you, that 24, in my opinion, is a great, opening chapter, if you will, to a book. But there's a lot more story, and you want to reach that ultimate high, if you will, that the climax of the story. So we're working our way up, and that's the whole plan here. And I think that the things that they were able to set forth with him is a great starting point. And when you make moves to get Juan Soto and you improve this team and bring in different types of players, it's about taking the next step. And I'm not saying that we were just a straight gimmick team, but removing gimmicks almost and just focusing on what you can do. And we'll hit on Carlos Mendoza and the comments he made saying how it's best for us to, be thankful for 24, but our eyes are very much in lockstep with what 2025 can be. And we're hungry and we want certain things. So Jose Iglesias, I say thank you. I said multiple times on this show that my two girls would constantly say, Alexa, play OMG, and they wanted to hear the song, and they would sing, and we would dance, and we would have a good time. And I was like, girls, like, I'm not sure if he's gonna be back. Like, I got to be able to let 2024 go. I'm trying to get excited for 25, but I would have 24 on my back for so long. And I think it's time to finally say, thank you. It's been an unbelievable ride, but I hope you can continue your career elsewhere, continue to thrive, help another clubhouse. But I'm with you. I'm with David Stearns and saying, let's let the kids play. Let's see what they can provide. Similar to what he said last year and, letting the likes of Francisco Alvarez play and Mark Vientos play. Let's see what they got. Same thing applies here for the likes of someone like Luis Acuna.
Yeah, I'll jump back into the comments. The sentiment is overall what we've been echoing, which is, yeah, it's a little sad to see that chapter go because, again, I'll pull this comment up from Carlos Ortiz. I think Candelita is not just a concert. He's a damn good player. And that's not what me and Ibby are saying. He is so much more than just the there was a gimmick aspect to it. So I will say he's so much more than just the gimmick. He was important on the field. He batted almost 400 in his limited appearance. What was he, 370 something? So the guy was great. And the guy has always played elite defense. He's got, maybe the best hands I've seen since Ray Ordonez. At this point in his career, range is a little bit less than what we saw from like prime Ordonez, but it'd be like this guy, his hands were electric in the field. It didn't matter where he was playing. And look, we had a guy in Luis Guillorme that became a cult hero because of the defense. But I've always stood by the fact, and Guillorme seems like a really good-natured dude, so I'm not trying to put him down in all of this. And also, he's not on the team, so it doesn't matter. But Guillorme, to me, was always a guy who was more of a gimmick, if you will, was more folklore, because the two biggest things that Luis Guillorme ever really did for the Mets both came in meaningless spring training games. You talk about that really long at bat he had against the Cardinals, where it was like, 14, 15, 20 pitches, whatever it was, that was in a spring training game. And then you talk about one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen, which is people diving out of the way of a flying bat and then palming it with one hand. Is that impressive? Yeah, but it's incredibly impressive, but it doesn't mean anything from a baseball team perspective. So just to use him as the example, Jose Iglesias gave us everything that we thought we were getting or we thought we could get out of having Luis Guillorme on the team for all of those years, which was elite defense, a bat-to-ball guy, and then he gave us the extra stuff, the fun, the good-natured. His story is so incredible, and, the song, of course, and then the Pitbull remix. So he is more than just a concert. He was a damn good player here, but it is just time to turn the page. And I think Edward Wall says it right when he says, I like Iglesias, but we need to play our kids. And this is a hearkening back to what you just said, but also to something that I have been preaching. And this is where Mets fans need to not talk out of both sides of their mouth. If you go all in on paying Juan Soto, which you should absolutely do, on a team that is already paying over $30 million for another star player in Francisco Lindor, in a team that has turned around and has signed a homegrown talent to another $30 million contract, albeit for only 1 year, that also employs Brandon Nimmo at a high dollar value and Edwin Diaz as the highest paid closer, in baseball, and Kodai Senga on a deal that we would agree is team friendly, but now he's been hurt for a whole year and he's got to come back out and he's got to live up to that contract yet again. There are a lot of, certainly not the Dodgers level, but there's a lot of high value, high dollar players on this team. You don't need high dollar players for the sake of vibes. And that's the thing that I'm always pushing when I make this ridiculous, look at the Dodgers with Gavin Lux playing second base example. Look at what the Mets can do with Luis Acuna filling the role of a Jose Iglesias, making the league minimum instead of making, I don't know, let's just say $6 million, which
Yeah,
is
eight,
something like
yeah.
that, $6, $7, $8 million that Jose Iglesias would be making. Now, if you could tell me you're guaranteed to get those vibes of 2024, and you're guaranteed that he's going to hit, let's not even say 370, 330 in his limited appearances, and he's not going to show any age, and he's going to be great again, then sure, you pay $7 million for that. But anyway, there's no guarantee. I think right now you could make the case. Of course, the floor is lower for Jose Iglesias because of the back of the baseball card, but the ceiling is higher if you play Luis Angel Acuna. And you have to recognize that. And you just have to be more attached to the name on the front of the jersey than the name on the back of the jersey. And that is not in any way, shape, or form a knock on Jose Iglesias, who seems like, I don't know him, you don't know him, but just from what we could see, seems like one of the nicest people on the planet. So no way, shape, or form is it a knock on him. It's just understanding where the resources need to go, especially when the Mets go over their self-imposed budget restrictions to bring back Pete Alonso. You really don't need to bring back Jose Iglesias now when you have guys in the minors or, on the precipice of the major league team, guys with cups of coffee that can fill that role.
Yeah, and I think some of the things that were being said out in the comments, I know Carson mentioned it too. It's like when you have a glut like this infield has, and we have a lot of guys that can play, a lot of the similar positions, and it's time to find out what they can actually provide for us. So whether it's the Acuñas of the world, the Jet Williams, the Ronnie Mauricios, like whomever, like it's time to see if they are worth the time that they have been here. Are they going to provide for us in the future? Is it time to move on so then we can figure out how to construct this team moving forward as we're trying to maintain said sustainability? Like you said, he's a career 280 hitter. He hit well above 350 last year. It's like you said, it's time to let it go. And to Carson's point as well, and as others, I think Odd Villain said it as well, like when you have someone like Jeff McNeil on this roster, it kind of clogs things up and takes away the role that a Jose Iglesias could have filled if Jeff McNeil wasn't here. And if you asked me today, who would I rather have playing second base between McNeil or Iglesias for this season, I would choose Jose Iglesias. I would. But you have to understand the limitations that there are, even when you have the guy who has the most money, that you try to do things smart. You don't want to keep on adding on to things. But McNeil is here. Odds are not what I want. I said this last week. I'll reiterate it. I don't want him at second base, but as of today, odds are he's probably going to be at second base, even though I want to see Luis Angel Acuna take that job. But we'll see what happens over the course of the spring. I hope he plays out of his mind and it forces him to make a decision. But ultimately, we'll see how they go about handling those last back end spots of this roster, because it's going to be very interesting based off the players that they have.
I think there's two really good, very succinct comments here. One from Carson, who says, baseball is business. Business isn't personal. And then we have this one from Hebrew Hammer. Welcome back, Hebrew Hammer. Chazin, formerly Chazin, to the show. It's all about perpetual sustainability. And just want to take a moment really quick. Shout out to Chazin, Hebrew Hammer. Things got a little heated with us and them last week. And I just want to say, sometimes that's how debate goes. And, things can get really emotional and really heated when you're talking about the team that you love. And we all have different ways of building a team and where we think money should be invested and things like that. And I want to give a special shout out to Hebrew Hammer for jumping into the comments after the fact on YouTube and apologizing for being a little emotional. And I would like to do the same in apologizing for being maybe a little emotional back. And I think that, you and I had this, sort of maybe a little bit more for me, but, we kind of had it go a little bit off the rails on what should have been a more celebratory show. But that's how it is when you have a live show and live comments and things come into play. And we're never going to silence anybody as long as you're being respectful. And Hebrew Hammer was, but I just want to say hat tip for, saying that, coming back and knowing that it's all love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, like we weren't ones that are often jumping into the comments like that to bring forth, vitriol towards someone else. But, sometimes things are said, and we've had spirited opinions before, and it just kind of came to a head. And look, to put it lightly, shit happens. Okay, we move on, we move forward. But like you said, we're not trying to not let people let their opinions be heard on the show. We're always about engaging with the chat. So we run with things as they go, and things got, like you said, a little bit heated last week, but it's all good, man. It's all good.
Absolutely. I'll jump back into the comments. We have some from earlier in the show that I've already starred and you've already starred off. Those are just separate conversations. So I want to kind of stick with this and not try to jump all over the place as much as we possibly can. So if you threw a comment out earlier about Francisco Alvarez's new swing or Drew Smith being signed or Vientos' spot in the lineup, we could talk about some of that stuff. And I think we should, but for right now, again, just keep the logical progression of the comment, but don't think that we're just glossing over it because we certainly are not. Sydney saying, I loved Iglesias while we had him. He was exactly what the 2024 team needed. Would have been nice to have him back, but it's okay. I think that is another great way to just be a sane, logical Mets fan. So great comment. Brad saying, if McNeil wasn't here, Iglesias made more sense. With 100%. McNeil and Mauricio coming back, that makes OMG gone. I do think that's true. Look, to your point, Ibby, if the Mets could have found a taker for Jeff McNeil, I would have rather have Jose Iglesias be your second baseman, sometimes shortstop, sometimes third baseman. You allow him to split a little bit of time, maybe with Acuna, or maybe you could send Acuna down to AAA at that point, and you could keep a guy like Madrigal on your roster, and you could see how that starts, even if it doesn't work. Even if you guys are like, oh, Madrigal, I don't want to hear about it. Look, you saw how quick the Zach Short experiment ended last year. So, Nick Madrigal does serve a purpose on this team if you want, like some of you do, Acuna to get reps every single day. Like Andre says here, I think Acuna starts in AAA. I don't know if they want him in a utility role as a young player. I respectfully, Andre, I think that ship has sailed now. I think the only way you see Acuna start in AAA is if Beatty has a better spring than him and Beatty proves that he could play second base, or, and I think this is less likely on the depth chart, Ronnie Mauricio proves that he is healthy and he is looking good and he is looking sharp. I just think he's the type of guy that is going to need to start in AAA to kind of build back into,
they said mid-March too. He's not getting back into games until the start, like mid-March for Mauricio. So we won't see. It's not going to be him. It wouldn't be him. No, it's not going to be him. And here's the other thing that I kind of mentioned as an offshoot of the Iglesias Madrigal situation, Ibby. There is no one else that I have named so far that would be a competent major league backup shortstop other than Luis Angel Acuna. Madrigal, for as good as he is defensively, and he is very good, he's Iglesias level good at second and third. He's not a shortstop. Ronnie Mauricio has had a lot of problems playing defense at different spots. I think he has a high ceiling as a second baseman. I think maybe kind of sort of in an alternate universe, you could have seen him as a third baseman if Pete Alonso wasn't back and Vientos moved over and all that stuff. But that ship has basically sailed. And, maybe in a pinch, in an emergency, you could put him at shortstop. But I think as we get further into Lindor's career, and I love the fact that he wants to play every day and wants to play shortstop every day, he brings so much value to this team. But as we get further into his career, he's going to have to take some half days off at DH. And if you have a guy who is a plus defender in Luis Angel Acuna on your roster, this is how you deploy him. That also helps you keep Francisco Lindor fresh. So I think all of that is part of it. And before I toss it back to you, I just want to bring this up as an offshoot, which is Carlos Ortiz saying, wouldn't Acuna playing the bench stunt his growth? Ibby, I just see Acuna as sort of on this team as a poor man's Ben Zobrist is the guy we always go back to. Play second, play short, play third, play center field, and get a lot of at-bats doing it enough where it's not necessarily going to stunt his growth. And when you look at his ability to play second and play center field in two positions that are kind of in flux for the Mets a little bit. Listen, if he goes off, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit more with McNeil, I could see a situation where he becomes the everyday second baseman. I don't think it's going to start that way, but I could see a situation where he works his way into that role, and that's still
a good problem to have, because despite McNeil's contract, you still do have some versatility there with McNeil. But I just think as it relates to specifically Acuna, I think you could slide him to 4 spots on the diamond and get him a lot of at-bats.
Yeah, I think I was mentioning some of this on Carson's show the other day, because they were talking about it too, and they were talking about how him potentially starting in AAA. It's about the idea of getting consistent reps, and how that's something that we've heard a lot about over the years when it comes to these younger players. And I'm really hoping, as others have said in the comments, that Acuna plays out of his mind and he earns himself a spot on this roster to not only be on the, as a bench piece or rotating chess piece, if you will, on the overall board, but I want him to play well to the point where he forces the issue of being the starting second baseman over Jeff McNeil. Like, that's what I really hope happens here. But in terms of the something of the growth thing, I don't think so. I don't think that, based off of what he did last year, yes, small sample size, I understand. But based off of that, I still think that he showed that he can come off the bench and move around, and it doesn't have to be an everyday type of thing. What I fear, though, I ultimately do fear this, that as this goes on, unless it's like a completely incredible, out of this world spring, I fear that that's what we are going to hear, that we're going to hear, look, and I feel like it was kind of almost a precursor today when David Stearns was talking, and he was saying, and he made it a point to say it like this. And we always say that when David Stearns speaks, he doesn't lie to you. Everything he says usually comes to fruition. So when he says today, like, look, the opening day roster is just for one day. It's not what it's going to be moving forward. So when I heard that, like, right away, I said, God damn it, Nick Madrigal's going to be on this roster. That was the first thing I said when I heard it. So I was like, I can see it being where Madrigal's here and Acuna's not here, and they're going to play the whole idea of him playing shortstop during the spring. He was adequate enough. We want to get Acuna at bats, and then we'll play it as we go. And then when it's time, we'll make the switch. And and at that point, it might be Madrigal on the clock or McNeil on the clock, essentially, when it comes to that spot on the bench. But that's what I fear is going to happen. I don't want to be right when I say that. I want to be 100% wrong. I want to be ridiculed for being so stupid. I don't want it to be the case, but I'm fearing that that's what's going to happen. And when I hear David Stern speak today, like, it's kind of like a small hint. Obviously, we have to go out there and see how things progress during the spring, and it could change completely if he goes off. But that's where I kind of am, and I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to be right on that. I really don't.
Yeah, I think I do think that's fair. But I also think, again, this is a guy who has shown in David Stearns that he is quick on the trigger regardless, or that he's going to do something that is savvy. So if you say, like the case that I just made, well, eventually you have to have a guy on the roster who can be a backup shortstop. Well, Ibby, I'll underline, circle, bold, and italics the word eventually. For the first 2 weeks of the season, hell, for the first month of the season, you might say, if you're David Stearns, we don't really need that. We got Lindor, and we need that in August, so we don't need that right now. So we can carry Nick Madrigal on this team. We could send Luis Angel Acuna down to AAA, let him play every day for 2 months or a month or 6 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever, and then call him up. It is sort of the path to how Vientos got back on this team, which people were not happy with, but it did work. Ultimately, it worked out for the best. And I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, Ibby, but I did tell you, and I said on this show, that Mark Vientos, once they signed JD Martinez last year, his best path to being on the Mets was to get as good as he possibly could in AAA at third base. People were like, he's got to be on the roster. You got to keep him up here. He's a great pinch hitter. He could be your DH. He could split time. I'm like, nah, screw that. We haven't seen anything from Brett Beatty in a year and a half. Let's see what Mark Vientos can do. So, I just think that there are certain things that, to your point, might upset me, might upset you, might upset the majority of Mets fans. But like we always say, let Stearns cook. He's smart. He has this job for a reason. GSD saying, John, can you give my eulogy in the future after the OMG move on talk? Well, GSD, I hope that you're here for a very, 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 very long time. But sure,
Please,
I
Jesus,
will.
stay with us. Yeah.
I will do that. I don't want to forecast anybody needing a eulogy, but sure, I will certainly do that. Look, I think the best segue here. Oh, real quick shout out for Jeff Cohen saying, can I make a shameless plug on the
Always,
next Baseball
Jeff.
and BBQ podcast? And yes, you always can make a shameless plug.
Always.
He will be interviewing 1986 World Series champion Wally Backman. So tune in.
Gonna bring up all those Backman fans.
Yeah, tune into Baseball and BBQ and watch those toxic Wally Backman should be manager of this team come out of the woodwork. No,
They're
Wally
still
Backman, somewhere.
I'm
sure a good interview. It's nice to see that contingent of Met fans has gone away a bit, Ibby, because it seems like we have a young, inspired manager that people can get behind in Carlos Mendoza now. So, there was always going to be that talk.
The game has changed too. Ultimately, I think the game has changed to a point where it's like the style that everyone wanted for the longest time for the Mets, like the grit and the fighting and this. It's like sometimes you got to move beyond. Like we're talking about moving. Like we're in 2025. And we're trying to say, move on from 2024, like just a year ago. And there are still some people where it's like, guys, you got like 86, I'm sure was fantastic. It was a wonderful time. But at the same point, it's like, you got to let it go. Like you got to evolve. You got to get a little bit better. Like, and the game has changed. Same thing I always said about Knicks fans. It's like, they always went back to the 90s. It's like, guys, the game of basketball changed big time. It's not about beating people up and, scoring 70 points a game. You got to go out there and score 140 now to win. And the Knicks are doing that. Like they finally evolved and they're a fantastic team. So it's like things change within the game. But yes, it's good to see that Mets fans are finally starting to rally around the one who is putting out that lineup card for us in Carlos Mendoza. And he deserves it. He had a great first year and hopefully he can build on it in this the second year.
Absolutely. I'll take this comment and then we'll kind of transition, I think, to the McNeil portion of this conversation, because while you and I are on record saying that we don't really want McNeil on this team, it's very clear that at least to start, McNeil's going to be on this team and is going to be given every opportunity to be the everyday second baseman. So first, Hebrew Hammer says, I love what Iglesias brought to this team. That said, I want to see the kids and I want to see the young talent that we have in this organization. And with such limited spots, unfortunately, there just isn't room for a guy like Iglesias. Now, look, the one last thing I'll say on this Iglesias thing, Ibby, as it relates to Acuna and Mauricio and Jet Williams and Brett Beatty and blah, 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 blah. Iglesias is still a free agent. And I don't think this is going to happen, but if a guy gets hurt in spring training, like we already know Ronnie Mauricio, like you said, isn't really even getting games until mid-March. So that takes him out of the offering. But then you have Acuna. Well, what if he's terrible? Okay, well, what if Brett Beatty hits, but he can't play second base? And then what if, Jet Williams is also not good and he's not really factoring into the plans off the rip anyway? I could see a situation where maybe their hand gets forced and they have to bring in a guy like Iglesias, or they feel like they might have to try because what they're seeing in spring is not the most inspiring thing. And there's some injuries, but I think you'd have to have a lot of things go wrong for him to be brought back. And I'll bring up this comment from Carlos Ramos, who said, John and Ibby, if possible, I wanted to talk about this topic, if not today, then next week, but we're onto it now because a lot of people in the comments are talking about this. If the Mets aren't going to be able to trade Jeff McNeil with that horrible contract, should we treat him like Cano and just cut bait? I'll bring this up from Charlie, who says McNeil is owed about $32 million with a $2 million buyout for 2027. He'd really have to stink up the place for the Mets to Cano him. Look, the Mets ate more money on Robinson Cano than they would have to eat on Jeff McNeil. I don't think that Jeff McNeil is a particularly productive player at this stage in his career. I've often said on this show, he needs to hit a minimum of 300. And really that number is more like 310, 315, unless he's going to hit a bunch of home runs like he did at points last year, or he did in the juice ball era. If you're going to hit 20 home runs or even 15, 16, 17 home runs, then maybe you can hit 270 if you're Jeff McNeil, because he's providing something else that he normally doesn't do. But Ibby, I could see the Mets moving on from Jeff McNeil if this year gets off to another bad start, whether that is dumping him for a bag of baseballs because somebody else has an injury and you eat some money just to clear his roster spot, or if that is giving him the quote-unquote Cano treatment at some point. But I just don't think organizationally for the Mets right now, today, February 12th, it has come to that yet. You might disagree. I might disagree. The entire chat might disagree. We know Carson does. We know Carlos Ramos does. But I just think that right now, they look at the way this roster is constructed, and they see that McNeil has some kind of a role on this team. And I don't think that they're entirely wrong about that part. And I think the non-committal nature of Carlos Mendoza saying that Jeff McNeil would be your starting second baseman is all you need to know. At some point, Jeff McNeil's time on this team will be over. And I think we are closer to the end than we ever have been. But I think anybody who's hoping for it to happen tomorrow, next week, before the season starts or whatever, that's not going to happen. So just temper your expectations a little bit.
Especially when I think someone sent it in our chat and I saw it was posted. I don't know if it was Pat Ragazzo who wrote it, but it was about Jeff McNeil being here, the versatility aspect, not right to sell low and all this stuff. I'm just like, look, first of all, I have no problem with Pat Ragazzo. I think he's fantastic. We still haven't gotten him on the show. We got to work on getting him on here at some point. But the problem I had with the article in general is like, he's not the only one who does this. It's others as well. It's the fan base where it's like always talking about that versatility and saying he provides so much. And it's like, guys, it's 2025 now. Like, it's not 2021. It's not 2019. Like, it's to the point now where we as a team can aspire for more. And I think that this team has evolved so much that a player like Jeff McNeil, in my opinion, and to yours, obviously, as well, when you talk about if he's not going to hit 310 or higher, it's like, what are you really providing this team? It's like, I'm sitting here watching a game and praying that this guy can somehow put a charge into a ball and maybe hit a gap for a double. But in reality, I'm praying that he doesn't just have like this duck fart single, essentially. And it's like you can get a lot more out of someone else. At the borrow Carson's line, it's like you can get a lot more from someone for a lot cheaper too. And I know money doesn't matter. I get that. But for what you're paying versus what you're getting, it's nowhere near worth having this guy. Would I love to Cano him? Sure. Is it going to happen? No, it's not, especially when you have so many people still writing. And I do think that these things do come from places when you have people writing about the versatility aspect and this and that. Look, I said this and I'll repeat it. If we're talking about Jeff McNeil versatility, and that means you're talking about putting this guy in a corner outfield spot, this team, we got some problems. Because if we're putting Jeff McNeil in a corner spot right now, we got some problems, especially when you have the Martes and the Winkers of the world who aren't great in the outfield. They're not great, but you can still put them there. If we're talking about Jeff McNeil's versatility, there's an issue going on. We're in some trouble. That's for sure.
I think you make a really good point, and I'm happy that you brought up some of the names that you brought up. Look, could I see a situation where McNeil, starts a game in left field or something, or starts a game in right field where Soto's DHing or something like that? Yes, but unlike in years past, and that versatility is important for potential injuries and things of the like.
Sure.
But you're right in the fact that while the game has changed, McNeil has never, maybe in the dead ball era, profiled as a corner outfielder. That part has not changed. So if you could throw him out there because you have to for a couple games because, the plantar fasciitis is acting up for Brandon Nimmo or something like that, okay, fine. But you've already alluded to the fact that, Ibby, the Mets have good outfielders that I would rather have out there instead of Jeff McNeil on an even semi-regular basis. I mean, Tyrone Taylor is an excellent defensive outfielder. It doesn't matter if it's center or the corners. So why, if Nimmo needed a spell, would you not put Tyrone Taylor out there instead of Jeff McNeil? He's better than Jeff McNeil. Then you get into the guys who might not be better than Jeff McNeil, quote unquote, but are probably better suited to being out there, which is the Jesse Winker or the Starling Martes of the world. Now, yes, most days those guys are going to occupy your DH spot in what is almost a straight platoon. But again, as you get into the season, could you see a situation where you're like, you know what, man? I'd like to load this lineup with lefties in some way, shape, or form. So I got to find a way to get Winker and, Nimmo and Soto on the field in addition to a Jeff McNeil. So we got to have, Winker and DH, and we have to have McNeil at second base. Like, you could see situations where these things play out, or the opposite is true, where you want to get an extra right-handed bat. Their platoon splits speak for themselves with regards to Marte and Winker, but it's not like either guy is completely useless against their same-handed pitchers. So I think that's another thing to factor in. And also, you're getting stuff out of these guys. Like, Marte is a bad outfielder at this stage in his career because he doesn't move great, but he still has the arm. You're going to keep Marte healthier if you're not playing him in the outfield on a consistent basis, but we're not talking about a consistent basis. So to me, I agree with you. There are 3 players that I would rather put in the outfield than Jeff McNeil. And they are probably in this order: Tyrone Taylor, Jesse Winker, and Starling Marte. Then you could talk to me about McNeil. Now, again, it's baseball. It's a long season. Things can happen. Injuries can happen. But I don't understand where the versatility here is being, I think, weighed too. It's put too much importance is being
way
put
too much
on his versatility.
At this point, this is strict contract. Like, no doubt in my mind, this is strict contract. And they're saying, look, we got to ride this out a little bit longer, give a little more leash just to see. Because, look, let's be honest here. From what we saw, and people are going to pick and choose. I know Carson was already joking about it in the chat. Like, they're going to pick and choose in the second half what McNeil was able to do and this and that. And he was pulling the ball, and the ball was coming out harder off his bat, the EVs or whatever. I'm sorry, but I can watch a McNeil at bat, and I can watch a Luis Angel Acuna at bat. And I can say that even if Acuna struggles, are his struggles that much worse than what we've been getting from Jeff McNeil?
No, I would say no.
Like, honestly, so at that point, why am I not playing the kid
Listen,
who's a better glove, who's faster, who provides something more? Why aren't I doing that so I can allow him to get his feet, his feet might get under him a little bit more, get more than the 14 games that are being used against him as a detriment because it's not enough? Why aren't we playing him more to then see, can he do this? And if he can, well, now we have an excuse to not have to worry about playing Jeff McNeil as often.
This is a good point from Carson, just saying Nimmo, Soto, Taylor, Siri, Winker, Marte, all actual outfielders. McNeil is not a utility player anymore. He's a second baseman. 2019 was 6 years ago. A presidential term and a half.
It's true.
I think that's a really good way to put it in perspective.
It is.
I'll say this, Ibby. And again, I'm not everybody in the chat, everybody watching later, everybody listening tomorrow. I'm not saying that this is what I would do as far as advocating. I'm just saying if I were the Mets, this is how I would push it. Whether it was Stearns himself or Mendoza himself or through whatever, writer and journalist is their mouthpiece. I would just say, hey, we have a lot of young, middle of the diamond players that could potentially play a role at second base. That includes the names you all know of Luis Angel Acuna and what he did last year when he filled in admirably for Francisco Lindor. However, he did not have a great year in AAA. He's still a very young player, and we don't want to put any undue pressure on him. With Mauricio coming off of a major injury and not playing in 18 months, and Jet Williams coming off of an injury-plagued go of it in AAA, we think that right now, maintaining Jeff McNeil at second base, regardless of what he does, is good insurance for the kids. That would be the statement. Fuck the versatility portion of it. Now, again, I'm not advocating for that. If I were in charge, I would just run Acuna out there. I would. It seems like you would too. It seems like most of the people in the chat would just say, you know what? We've got a lot of star power on this team.
That's the main
Second base is not going to make or break this team. Just put Acuna out there and see what would happen. That's what I would do. But Ibby, the argument that I just made on behalf of the Mets with the air quotes around it, I think is a much more sensible approach than, oh, but he's versatile. You know what I mean? Like just saying,
I
like,
agree.
hey, he's a veteran, and we want the veteran to offer us some protection for the kids who may or may not be ready to take that everyday step. To me, that's just such a better narrative to run out there, even though that'll upset some people, because the versatility one is kind of bullshit.
It is bullshit. Like I read that, I'm just like, you make it seem like I haven't been watching this team ever since the guy's been here. Like I hated when I saw it because it's a tired conversation, it's a lazy conversation, and I think it's one that's not needed. And to the point that you were just making, I agree with it wholeheartedly. It's like if this team was lacking in other areas and this team wasn't where it even is right now, I could understand a team wanting to trot out a Jeff McNeil. But based off of what it has, the lineup that we're thinking about constructing, numbers 1 through 5, 1 through 6, okay, it's like it's not make or break. To your point, it's not going to ruin this lineup if Luis Acuna was batting 9th. Like it's not. Like if anything, I'm at a point where I feel more confidence in Luis Acuna turning the lineup over at 9 than I am Jeff McNeil, because I know if he hits a dribbler, I think Acuna can actually beat it out. Where McNeil's is gonna be thrown out by half a step, throw his helmet, and start cursing at everybody. Like, not that look, you want to have fire, I don't care. Like that's fine. But at this point, I just don't feel that the protection that is constantly done of Jeff McNeil is needed. And I'm hopeful that the way Mark Vientos was able to establish himself last year and then take grab of something and be able to maintain it. I hope that the same is available this year, that if McNeil slips, a la how Beatty was not providing anything at third, if McNeil is slipping at second base, that the job is going to be there for the taking, and Luis Angel Acuna will have the chance to take it and be able to run with it.
I'll jump back into the comments here. This one was from a while ago from Carlos Ramos, but I think it's a good one. He says, Acuna should be the everyday second baseman, regardless of spring training. McNeil hasn't earned the right to be the everyday second baseman. Acuna did more for the 2024 team in the last 3 weeks of the season than McNeil did all year. I think that last one, you can argue a little bit just to play devil's advocate, simply because after the All-Star break, McNeil had a similar 2 or 3 week stretch that was very important offensively for this team. And while Acuna was super important down the stretch, you could say that they had maybe a similar impact on the 2014. If you want to say that Acuna gets the edge because he did it filling in for Lindor, who is fighting for an MVP playing shortstop, I will also concede that point. But the larger point here from Carlos, I do agree with. I don't think McNeil has necessarily earned any more leeway at this point. And if you go a little bit further down, sorry, I didn't mean to pull up that one. We'll get to that one from Rosie in a little bit. Yeah. This is why what Carlos said, not only that, Ibby, but Acuna has speed that in and of itself puts him above McNeil. I think there is something to be said about that, which you just sort of touched on, Ibby, which is, I think that when you factor in the defense, which Acuna will be better at second base, and you factor in the speed on base, I think even if Acuna isn't good, he would be a more valuable player than McNeil, because I don't think McNeil is going to hit 310. And again, he has to. Otherwise, he's a useless offensive player.
And we're also talking about the idea. Yeah, we're also talking about the idea of defense as well. I think Acuna's a better defender.
That's what I'm
McNeil.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's if that's the ultimate thing, I'll take that, because we're building this team on ground ball pitchers. Let me get Acuna out there. Then they can say, well, they can do switches towards the end of the game, 7th inning on, that he can fill in those spots, and that might happen. And that might be his job in the beginning, when they might want to hide Mark Vientos in the later innings, potentially, of bettering the defense at third. Like, that could happen. That could be how Madrigal gets on this team. That could be how Acuna gets on this team if he does well at third base during the spring and the tryouts that they're going to have for him when it comes to that. But I know that this team has evolved over the last handful of years, and I'm tired of the Jeff McNeil, yeah, buts. Yeah, but he could. Yeah, like even when I'm talking with people, Mets fans at work, things like that, like, and I still hear they're coming out of their mouths, and I hear them out, but it's just like when I constantly hear them say, "Yeah, but could you imagine if Jeff McNeil does?" I'm like, can we get beyond? Like, there's a lot more going on with this team, but we're still worried about Jeff. Like, why? Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm ready to move forward. I know that this team is not going to do it yet, but I'm hopeful that they will give the opportunity to the given player, a la Luisangel Acuna, to take that job and run with it for as long as it takes.
If you are watching live, you're watching Til Mets Do Us Part on YouTube, on Twitter, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. Shout out to John Minconi. If you haven't already, throw a thumbs up, like the video. Lets us know that you like what we're talking about, what you're seeing, and it also helps out the algorithm on YouTube, pushes it out to other Mets fans like yourselves, like ourselves as well. We're about to get into the break in another couple of minutes. We'll probably be here with you for about an hour and 45 minutes or so, as we have been over the last several weeks. That's kind of become what this show is. But also subscribe to the channel, because if you subscribe and turn notifications on, you will never miss the opportunity to know when we're going live, which is important for emergency episodes. But most importantly, the chat has been so active and so electric and so informative, and you cannot become a live participant in the chat unless you are a subscriber to this show. Jump back into those comments. Douglas Barnes saying, McNeil could start opening day and then Acuna could play a bulk of the time. I think Stern's comment about opening day could be taken that way too. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I'm not 100% sure that that's how I would take it, but I also can't discredit that, because that is one way of looking at it, where it's like, hey, you know what? The opening day lineup is the opening day lineup. And then after that, it's like you're only the leadoff hitter for one time in a game, right? Like you're only the leadoff hitter. You're guaranteed to lead off the first time. And then after that, who the hell knows? So I think that's a similar kind of way that Douglas is looking at this. So I cannot discredit that at all. This one is a good one, Ibby, when you're talking about the evolution of this team. Carson says, everyone forgets the context. Can McNeil play multiple positions? Sure. But that mindset goes back to when the Wilpons were too cheap to get a versatile utility piece and viewed Dom Smith as a left fielder.
Yes.
That's a good point. Everybody poo-poos the signing of Jose Iglesias last year as depth, or the signing of Nick Madrigal as depth, or saying, yeah, I don't really love Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri as a platoon piece, but you look at these guys and like, this is what competent, good baseball teams who aren't afraid to spend money do. You don't need to bank on McNeil's versatility if he's going to hit a punchless 250. Who cares? I'd rather have Luisangel Acuna hit 220, sock a couple home runs, steal a couple bags, and play great defense than Jeff McNeil hitting 250. It's disgusting.
I agree.
It's brutal. And look, I do think this is a factor too. People might disagree with this, but I think Carlos is kind of right here. I think McNeil not only sucks, but he's a bad influence in the dugout. Now, I don't think he's a bad influence as far as, like, I don't think other players strongly dislike him. But I think the antics, the throwing the helmet, the being pissed off, the chirping at the umpires, you really can't get away with that unless you're really fucking good. You better be Bryce Harper. You better be Paul O'Neill winning World Series for the Yankees. Like you can't be that. Like he's a fucking crybaby. There's a difference. We talked about it last year. Yeah. There's a difference between the fire that Bryce Harper shows and the crybaby attitude that Jeff McNeil shows. There is.
It's all based off of the results. Like, what am I getting? Like, yeah, Bryce Harper's going to rip a 3-run homer in a huge spot and be angry that, he got punched out on a ball that was outside. It's a different story. When I'm watching Jeff McNeil, scream at people and be pissed off because, he popped up or, he grounded out or whatever because he can't hit the ball out of the infield. It's like, again, I'd much rather watch Luisangel Acuna put a charge into a ball and hustle down the line or make a sliding stop in the hole, with some better defense. But alas, hopefully we get there at some point. But I think we're going to be living with this for a little bit while longer.
Look, Michael says you want to see antics. Wait for Jose Siri.
Yes,
but again,
it's true.
I think there is a difference. Look, Jose Siri, and again, he's not a great offensive player, sells out for power. He's going to strike out a ton. But in his worst offensive season last year, he hit 18 home runs. A year before that, he hit like 25. And he's a great, underline, all caps, bold, great center fielder. You're not talking about a guy who is maybe at this point in his career, a slightly above average, and I don't even think he's that anymore, second baseman. You're talking about an elite impact center fielder who in a bad year is still going to run into 18 bombs. I'll roster that guy every day. He could have all the swag he wants and all the antics, because like Carson says, that's aura. It's different.
Yes.
It's also different.
And remember, he's also going to protect your extremely large investment of Juan Soto when everyone wants to be screaming about, oh, his defense isn't that great. Yeah, well, this guy was like, I believe, +8 defensive runs scored heading towards right field. If there's one thing I have to do real quick before we go into the break, I did just get a text message that my kids, for the first time, are actually sitting on the couch at my mother-in-law's place, and they're actually watching us right now. So
oh my God, I'm so sorry for the language.
It's okay. It's okay. They hear worse. It's okay. No, I want to take the time to say hello to them. It's the first time I'm ever watching the show. So Avery Shea, hello. Daddy's right here. Scarlett, good to see you. Hope you're enjoying the show. Make sure you're good for Mimi over there, okay? But I want to take my time to say that because it's the first time they're actually watching. So love you. Thank you.
Well, hello to Ibby's kids from me and also from Charlie, who's saying hello to Ibby's kids, and from Michael as well. I think this is good because this is a classic New York term coming from the place that I would have expected, which is Oddville, and saying Siri and Winker have Riz. McNeil is a herb. He's a herb. He's just a herb, man. He's just
that's a good one.
And that's a nice melding of the new school and the old school. Riz and Herb all at the same time. Before we head into the break, I do just want to bring up these two things just to put this McNeil conversation to bed. Charlie saying McNeil has this swing at the first pitch habit, even when he hasn't seen a pitcher yet. That drives me nuts. That is another factor that I have always talked about on this show, which is McNeil does not have quality at bats. McNeil does not provide you. People say he's a good situational hitter because they think that means slapping the ball the other way. It doesn't. It factors in the entire situation. And how many times has McNeil come up with a leadoff walk and then a little base hit? It's first and second, nobody out in the 6th inning, and he rolls over a 65-mile-an-hour grounder to the shortstop on the first pitch. That is not good situational hitting. That is horrendous situational hitting. So I agree with Charlie there. And then this one, just because I have to say this on this show one more time, maybe. Andre saying, incredible. When McNeil signed his extension, everybody thought it was a great team-friendly deal. Now it's a total albatross. Ibby, and you agreed, but that I said it was a meaningless contract extension to sign because you do not sign late-blooming non-prospects who do not hit home runs and do not drive in runs to pre-arbitration contract extensions because they will never break the bank in arbitration. They're too old and their skill set does not lend itself to doing so. You look at Luis Ariz. What is he? Would he win 3 batting titles in a row? He's making $14 million a year.
Yep.
In arbitration. He's making less than Jeff McNeil, and he just won 3 batting titles in a row. That just goes to show you. And he's younger. And he did it at a younger age. You could have paid McNeil in arbitration every year. He would have been a free agent when he was like 33 or 34. You could have said, thanks for the memories, and somebody else would have signed him to a short-term deal or whatever. Or at any point, Ibby, you could have just traded him. But instead, they decided it was a genius move, our previous GM, to go out and give this guy a contract extension when no one in baseball would have given him a contract extension. He is not the kind of player that earns a contract extension. He's had, for all intents and purposes, basically one good year. I know he's had more than that when you look at the totality of his career pre that extension, but he's had basically one good year that would warrant being extended. And even that is with a batting title that people don't even really value anymore.
Right. And I'll bring this one up real quick from Game of War, saying how you can't show emotions in baseball no more unless you hit like Soto. This is from the let the kids play element. Look, we were just saying before, like, you can show emotion. I like when a guy cares. A guy can get angry. I understand. I've played the game. John's played the game. Like, I've gotten angry plenty when I play the game, whether it's something that happens on the base pass, at the box, at the ump. Like, it happens. I get it. But I think it's also just remembering who you are, and sometimes how it's going to come across to other people. It's like, you're not the guy. You're not him. Like, there is a difference. I'm not saying you have to hit like Soto, because everyone does, but it still comes with the idea of, God, like, almost kind of like know your place in a sense, almost like know who you are, know what you provide. And it's like, if you were a guy that was hitting 25, 30 homers a year, different story. But when you're hitting duck fart singles, not the same. Not the same.
Yeah, we'll head into the break on this. I think Odd Villain summed it up when he said there's a difference between Riz, or I'll use the word swag, and being a herb. Because look, no one's going to confuse Jesse Winker or Jose Siri for Juan Soto either. But there's just something about what they do that plays with a passion that's different than what McNeil does. It doesn't seem like what McNeil is doing is out of passion. It seems like what he's doing is out of frustration, because he's a little whiny baby. Like, it's just like, So anyway, that said, let's put this Jeff McNeil conversation to bed. It was a good conversation to have because it was an important offshoot of Jose Iglesias and Luis Angel Acuna and some of the Mets' other prospects. We'll head into the break. When we come out, we're not going to talk about any hypotheticals. We're not going to talk about anything with regards to really second base at this point. We've kind of done as much of a deep dive as this week necessarily deserves. If you're just watching for the first time, you're like, I don't want to sit through a break. Don't worry. It is just a quick 30-second ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show, and it allows us to take a breath and reset. So do not go anywhere. It's John Saponaro. It's Matt Ibanez. It is Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back with Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, brought to you by the Brella Sports Network. Shout out, of course, to John Minconi. And I should mention that if you missed any of the show, don't worry. When we're done in about an hour, 45 minutes or so, whatever, you can watch anything you missed, whether you showed up late or you had to leave early or some combination of the two. This broadcast will live forever on our YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Til Mets Do Us Part, when we are done with the live broadcast. You can also follow us on social media. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Blue Sky at Til Mets Do Us Part on all of those platforms. Or if you search Til Mets Do Us Part, you will find us. You can also follow us individually at John Saponaro or at Poison_Ibby. And if you can't do any of that with regards to watching the live show, don't worry, we've got you covered. This will drop tomorrow morning as an audio podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all of the places that you know and love where you get your podcast. The only difference is you won't be able to see our smiling faces while you listen. Ibby, that said, before we get into the conversation, back into the conversation with our New York Mets, a quick word from our friends over at Independent Safes.
Absolutely, John. IndependentSafes.com. Independent Safes are protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes. Fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit IndependentSafes.com today for security that stands strong. And this week, I think I'm putting that whole entire Jeff McNeil conversation into the safe. I would never put Jose Iglesias in the safe. He was fantastic. I'm just done with Jeff. So, Jeff, maybe it's going to get a little bit tight in there because I can only afford the smallest of safes, but maybe it might get a little bit tight in there with your golf clubs or what have you. But I might be tossing you in there just so I can allow Luis Angel Acuna to get his shine. But either way, we'll toss it into the river, throw away the key. IndependentSafes.com. Check them out. Tell them Til Mets sent you. They'll hook you up.
Charlie was right with you. He said Jeff McNeil would look great in an independent safe. That was right as you started saying it. So you guys were sharing a brain as far as that is concerned. Also, Charlie says, 52 people on YouTube. How are there not 52 likes? How, Sway? How? I don't
Simply
get it.
like the video, guys. I keep on saying in the comments, we like to hit at least a baseline of 50 likes on the YouTube side. So if we got 50 plus people in here on the YouTube side, fantastic. We got 315 here total so far between YouTube and Twitter. If you're on the Twitter side and you like GSD, you want to talk over on that side, that's cool. That's fine. Retweet us, spread the word over there so we can get more eyes on us. But if you want to head on over to YouTube, sub the channel, join the conversation, more than welcome with that as well. And you can always get your voice heard because we like to make sure that we highlight everyone that's new also that comes into the chat. One more thing I did want to mention that Hebrew Hammer brought up, asking us about super chats and things of that nature, not having the option. I am in the midst of working on that. So I'm hopeful that I can get it done by next episode. So that's something that we will be adding to the show. Yeah, it's one thing to add to the show, helps us grow a little bit more and more. Not sitting here begging, but just an idea. So we'll see. Hopefully, like I said, episode 182. We're on 181 right now. 182. Hopefully we'll be able to start implementing that as an option for people that want to contribute to Til Mets Do Us Part. So thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. It's something Abby and I, like he mentioned, I've been working on behind the scenes. Jeff, are you laughing at Jeff Cohen?
I laughed at that was a great one. It's a great Seinfeld line. I love it. Thank you, Jeff. That was a good one.
Sorry, I donate to the Human Fund, so it doesn't.
That's a good one.
Doesn't have it. It's funny though. You bring it up, and all of a sudden we went from like 20 something likes to 20 likes to 19 likes to 17 likes. Thank you, Michael, for keeping tabs on that. You bring it up. People are like, oh, because I do think a lot of times people get in here and they're watching and they're just. They
forget. Yeah.
They just forget. You're like, oh shit, let me jump in and do that real quick. Because it doesn't come to mind immediately. Maybe there's a couple of different places we could take the conversation. I am going to bring up this one next because I don't think it's the most important thing, but I do want to give the people what they want. And in some cases, the people what they don't want. I think it's funny, but I also think we can get in and get out pretty quick. D says, thoughts on Drew Smith, or as Carson said earlier, fucking Drew Smith, man. Also, hi, everyone. Or as Aunt Rivera from Subway to Shea said, all right, enough of this. It's time to talk Drew Smith for the rest of the show. We're not going to do it for the rest of the show. Drew Smith signs back with the Mets on a 1-year deal with an option. Drew Smith had Tommy John surgery with the brace procedure done last year in the middle of the season. He is likely out for all of 2025. So it allows him to rehab in basically the only organization that he's ever known. I know he was, traded for Lucas Duda. So he was not drafted by the Mets, but he's been in the Mets organization for a very long time. It allows him to stay a part of this organization while he rehabs, and it gives the Mets an option for 2026 in the bullpen as a part of depth. I know Drew Smith has his haters, and rightfully so, right? I think it's fine. He's a so-so middle relief arm, but I don't think this is something that anyone could get up in arms about. I know Carson will joke about it because he doesn't like him a lot, but Carson always says there's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal, and you certainly can't hate on a guy or an organization that does right by the guy of saying, you know what, continue your rehab here. We know you best. You feel safe. You feel secure. There's a human element to this. And I do think that's important. And I honestly think that's the most important piece here. He may never pitch for the Mets again, even though they just signed him to a deal.
Yeah, I saw it. I was like, okay. I knew you weren't going to see him this year. I echo everything that you just said. There's no point in repeating it because you hit it on properly when it comes to it's the only place that he knows. Take care of him. Again, continue the whole player first mantra that this organization is setting forth, family first, things like that. It's the only place he knows. So are we going to see Drew Smith this year? No. Do we need Drew Smith back here even when he's healthy? Probably not. I think we've, similar to the likes of Jeff McNeil, that this organization has grown a little bit more. I don't think we need to see high leverage Drew Smith innings anymore. I don't need that ever again. I wasn't able to sleep on those nights, and I was sweating profusely in my bed as I'm watching high leverage Drew Smith innings. So hopefully we don't have to worry about that moving forward, but I wish him all the best in his recovery and things of that nature. But yeah, I don't think it's anything that has to really get up in arms about because it's not going to be a factor this year.
No, it's just a name people know because he's been with the Mets.
So
like it was always going to, drum up some semblance of interest. There's some funny comments here. D just saying Drew Smith looks punchable, and then following it up by saying 2 Tommy John surgeries, which I know is just in response to me saying he had Tommy John. He's actually had it in the past, but it's funny to see these back to back where it's like he looks punchable because of the 2 Tommy John surgeries. He can't even punch back. His arm is useless. It's mostly for show. Odd Villain saying, he's trying to get 3. That's what it is. He's trying to get to 3, trying to corner the market on Tommy John surgeries. Carson saying, I'm not mad, but it's so fucking hilarious how much the baseball gods despise me. It's not just the baseball gods.
Drew Smith in one offseason is hysterical.
Listen,
fantastic. A fantastic Met content creator award right there. It really is.
I love Carson. Carson's a great content creator. We have our group chat and I'm just going to say this. So this is not me saying this, but I just want to be clear. I don't think the baseball gods are the only entities that despise Carson.
Based off the things that happened this week, I agree with that.
Correct. I think even Carson would agree with regards to that. This is another good one. Carlos saying, does the contract for Drew Smith come with a subscription to the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issues? It better fucking not, because every time that guy hits on somebody, he then gets lit up. He gets hit.
Yeah, he gets hit.
Like, wow, Drew Smith off to the best 3-week stretch of his career. Look at what he's doing. And then, yeah, exactly. A model shows up and he just like forgets how to play baseball. It's hilarious. Look, move on from the Drew Smith thing. Obviously, that's about all I can take of that. Ibby, I think this is a good sort of overarching comment. And this came from right after we started the show from Brad. Actually, Brad got a comment in before the show even started, but said first, listening to Stearns should give you so much confidence in this organization. And then said the lineup is better than the one that Soto went to the World Series with last year, meaning the Yankees lineup. I would also say that the Mets lineup is now better than their lineup was last year that was 2 games away from the World Series. Now, a lot of that hinges on one player, Juan Soto, but when you're talking about a guy who's an 8-WAR player last year, I don't think that that's something that you could say, and just kind of brush aside like, oh, well, it's just one guy. You added the best guy. You added a top 3 hitter in the sport. So, I think that's a good point from Brad. Not sure if Brad is still here with us in the show, was here for a bulk of the start of it. Ibby, your connection's a little weak. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, it just looks like your video is a little dragging behind. So I bring those 2 comments up to bring up this comment, who also came in early from Cindy saying, I like the idea of Vientos batting between Lindor and Soto. So I'm a fan of having Soto third. You and I both put out our projected lineups last week. Once Pete re-signed in our special Pete episode, we both had Soto batting second. There is a case to be made for potentially Soto hitting third. I do want to shout out somebody who I've been shouting out a lot lately, which is Ryan Finkelstein over on Locked On Mets. He did a breakdown of the lineup, why he thinks there is some validity to Soto batting third. And it really has to do with the Mets kind of guaranteeing Pete that he can hit behind Soto and assuring Soto that he would have a big power bat like he did with Judge hitting behind him. And that makes the most sense for it to be Pete. And his justification, you can go back, anybody, and listen to the show. It's very good, but was simply, if you put that out there, it makes more sense for Pete to be in the 4 hole than it does for Pete to be in the 3 hole. And I think there is some validity to that. Prior to getting to the Yankees, Soto preferred to hit third, not second. And I think you can do really some damage if you have Vientos. I think he has a lot of room to grow if you put him in that 2 hole in between Lindor and Soto. So I think I would still go the route of Soto second, but I don't think it is a catastrophe to bat him third. I know that's more conventional wisdom and it gives him less at bats, but another thing that Ryan Finkelstein broke down, I think on average, it's like 20 less at bats a year in the 2 hole versus the 3 hole. And I don't know that that's necessarily worth it to upset the fabric of the entire lineup was his point. So, Ibby, what do you think about it? Like, would you be upset with them going to a, let's say, Lindor, Vientos, Soto, Alonso, Nimmo lineup?
I wouldn't be against it. And obviously, some of the people that are talking about this in the comments before, I did put up a poll. I forgot to mention it earlier in the show. I did put up a poll on the YouTube side asking a simple question. Where do you want to see Juan Soto hit in the lineup? Because I know that in our chat last night, late night, Carson over at Mets Weekly and CPNY Sports were going back and forth about second and third. So I thought it was a good question to put out there. And 55 votes are there right now and climbing. And right at this moment, it's 53% to 47%, where the 3-hole is winning out right now, 53% to 47%. So it's close, a couple of votes different there. So if you haven't voted yet, make sure you do. For me, I have changed over time where I always felt like the 3 spot was where your best hitter was. And I've evolved over time and saying
it's simply not now. Your best hitter hits 2.
It's the 2. So look, I fully believe Carlos Mendoza when he says I'm going to have a conversation with Juan Soto to find out where he wants to bat. I fully believe that when you invest in a player like this, you're going to take his input as well to make sure that you put him in a spot where he thinks it's best for him. And I've seen the numbers of him batting second, him batting third in lineups. And I know that the numbers of him batting third skew a little bit higher, but I also understand the reasoning. And I know Carson, if he's here still, he wants to put him into the chat, he can, about the amount of at-bats that you get batting out of the 2-hole, high leverage at-bats for the guy batting in the 2-hole versus other positions. I can understand wanting him to be second. He's your highest paid player. It's a huge investment. You want this man up the most. So I get wanting to put him second. And I love the idea of him batting right after Lindor. But at the same time, is there an opportunity to create a lineup that has Soto third and then putting a Nimmo at second, or however you want, or if you want to put Vientos there, or however you want to go about it? If you want to put guys to get on base and bettering the on-base percentages, with better on-base percentages in front of a Pete Alonso so you can drive them in. Look, there's a lot of machinations that you can run with. And I'm not going to fight you over it because in the end, I still have Juan Soto in my lineup. For me, though, I want him up the most. I do. So I'm still, at the moment at least, and things can change, me as a fan, I want him batting after Lindor. I want him batting second. That's what I want. But again, I'm not going to kick and scream like many do when it comes to the lineup on the day-to-day basis. And the thing that we avoid on this show when it comes to the season starting, I'm not going to cry about that if Juan Soto's batting third. It's like, no, I still have Juan Soto in my lineup. Let's just go out and score some runs.
Yeah, I think it comes down to this comment from Carlos Ramos, who just says the lineup is very, very good. That's true. And that was before we started some of this dialogue, just mentioning the players. But I think that that's really what Met fans need to hang their hat on. They still have Soto on their team, and either way, the lineup is going to be very, very good. Now, on this show, we have made a habit of not getting hung up on the daily lineups. We only addressed the lineups a couple times. We addressed the lineups in a situation like last week in our special episode. Okay, Pete is back. Okay, let's talk about what your ideal lineup would be as we start to get towards the start of the season. And we now have a main cog back that we weren't necessarily sure we were going to have. And also the team looks, for the most part, complete, at least to start the season, so we can start to muse about that. The other time that you and I will address the lineup is if it becomes a long-term problem. Like if you're just like, my God, why is this guy still hitting blank? Or why is this guy still getting all the at-bats? It kind of goes back to like the Vogelback, conversations of it all, where it's just like, yeah, like I understood what you were doing, but like, why is this a never-ending Vogelback situation where he's just getting forced down our throats on the daily? So, other than that, you and I do not argue a lot about the lineups, whether it be in our personal lives or, on this show, especially because I just don't think it's a worthwhile conversation to have. But here's some of the thoughts from people in the chat. Carlos saying, to be honest, the more I think about it, the more I'm liking Vientos batting second and Soto third. I'm good either way, to be honest. we have this comment from Hebrew Hammer saying, in my opinion, it all hinges on what we're going to see from Francisco Alvarez. If he takes the next step, which I think he will, he can be in the heart of the lineup as well. I bring that one up because this was something also that Ryan Finkelstein discussed on Locked On Mets, but I also have been a proponent of this, and I think I kind of touched on it last week when I was throwing out my projected lineup, which is, I said to you last week, I think the Mets are going to go Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Pete, Nimmo, and then the DH. But I think eventually, if Alvarez is the player that he showed to be as a prospect, and Alvarez is the player that we all think he could be, and he's some combination of the power in the first year and then some of the selectivity that he showed last year where he can be a little less boom and bust, because he was last year so down when he was down. If he could get himself into the 6th spot in the lineup, Ibby, I can really be sold on a lineup that is Lindor, Vientos, Soto, Pete, Nimmo, Alvarez, then the DH, and then depending on who your DH is, you also have the flexibility, if you wanted to kind of flip-flop McNeil and Siri back and forth if you wanted to keep a more left-right approach, which I don't think is necessarily the biggest deal, but you could do that. And I think there is something to be said about Lindor being a guy who can get on base, Vientos being a guy who can hit fastballs. You're never going to get more fastballs to hit. He absolutely mashes them. You're never going to get more fastballs to hit than with Lindor on base and Soto behind you, because Soto is an on-base machine. He gets on base a 400 clip routinely. That's almost 50% of the time. He is going to take what they'll give him. And so I think you also break up, and I don't care that Pete and Vientos are both right-handers, but I think you break up a little bit of what they offer, and then you have a different kind of hitter in Nimmo, then a different kind of hitter in Alvarez, then a different kind of hitter in either Marte or Winker. So I think long-term, there is a way to set this up now that Pete is back just for this season. There is a way to set this up where Soto hitting third is not something I'm going to be up in arms about. It really isn't. I'm with you where give your best guys the most at bats, and I'm good with that. But there's something that I like about Pete hitting 4th, not 3rd. If they're going to bat him behind Soto, I like Lindor, Vientos, Soto, Pete better than Lindor, Soto, Pete, Nimmo, or Vientos, you know what I mean? So if that other stuff comes into play, I would rather see Soto bat 3rd, Pete bat 4th, and push Nimmo further down the lineup than have Nimmo in the 4-hole or Vientos even in the 4-hole. So to me, it really comes down to what the other guys do.
I know Carson was just, I want to pull up the comment saying this one here, $765 million to not get those 20 more plate appearances is self-handcuffing. More opportunities, more damage. Ducks on the pond is more of a fantasy than reality now. Flaw and strength protection is more important. I understand what he's saying. I get it. I don't think it's worth the. I get his. I'm sorry to interrupt. I get his larger point. I just don't think. I don't think it's 20 at bats. That's such a small amount of at bats. His larger point makes sense, but you're not paying for those 20 extra. In my opinion. He disagrees, and that's fine. But to me, I cannot make a stink when it's 20 at bats. I can't. Yeah, I think ultimately, it's going to come down to that conversation. And in my, if allowing Mark Vientos to thrive and be a 2-hitter because of what you laid out before, Lindor in front of him, Soto behind him, feeding fastballs. He's done most damage on fastballs, eliminating things that hurt him from a strikeout perspective, potentially. I get that, but I don't know, man. For me, until I see or get proven otherwise, I want to see that Lindor Soto back to back and go from there. Because I think that, when you had, and it's different, obviously, when you had Judge and Soto, it's a completely different dynamic. Two different types of hitters between Judge
very
and Lindor.
different.
Very different. But I think this lineup, as it was said earlier, is deeper. So it's not that much of an issue where it's like, oh, they only had 2 hitters, and then you were able to do more damage with everyone else because they couldn't cash in. I don't think that's that much the case here. So putting my best 2 guys at 1-2 instead of sandwiching someone between the 2 of them, I kind of like that. I like that more. But again, I'm not one that really fights tooth and nail when it comes to the overall lineup itself.
Yeah, and look, Mr. Nobody's saying it, and I'll take the may out of this. Soto may bat where Soto wants. No, Soto's going to bat where Soto wants. Prior, and he said it. I'm not saying this. I'm not basing it. Like, there are some good points to be made about like the numbers being better in the 3-hole because he had more time in the 3-hole or whatever. But
yeah, I'll try to find those numbers. Yeah.
Soto said he preferred to hit third prior to going to the Yankees. And again, yes, the Lindor-Soto dynamic 1-2 is great, but you also have to remember that on the Yankees, he had Aaron Judge hitting behind him.
Yeah.
And Aaron Judge, both guys, Soto or Judge, could be your 2-hitter. So going 2-3 with them makes more sense. Going 2-3 with Pete doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I would rather have Pete in the 4-hole. And again, if you're saying, well, you could solve that by putting Vientos in the 3, I mean, you could, and that's the lineup that I drew up last week. So I'm not going to argue that. I'm trying to go off what people have said, and what it seems has been said is that at least to start the year, Soto wants Alonso to bat behind him, and Alonso wants to bat behind Soto. So wherever Soto hits, Alonso is going to hit next. That is not my saying it. It's the Mets saying it. So, I don't know. That's where I lie on that. I mean, you have Carson saying 20 you'll never get back in terms of at bats that you need against high profile arms, higher in the lineup, higher probability of higher leverage situations. I agree. I mean, I get it, I should say, but again, it's 20. It's still, I can't get up in arms. Am I crazy? Am I being too short-sighted? It's 20 at bats.
I think it's just
that's less than a week of games.
I think where Carson's coming from ultimately is like every at bat is critical in terms of you want this guy like again, because it comes back to the amount of money that you spend. Like, you gave this guy all this money because he's a hitter. This guy is the best. If you're going to comp this guy to Ted Williams, you want this guy up as many freaking times as possible. So when he's in that box, he has an opportunity to do damage for you to win you a ball game. I think that's ultimately, and Carson, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's where he's coming from ultimately, even when he's harping on the 20 at-bats.
Right.
I think that's where it ultimately comes from. And I did pull up these stats so people can see, because someone did mention it in the comments. Soto career batting second, 268 batting average, 407 OBP, 483 slug, 890 OPS. These are some good numbers, man. His overall weighted runs created plus
he's so fucking good. Holy shit.
152 weighted runs created plus, batting second, batting third, 288 batting average, 438 OBP, 548 slug, 986 OPS, a 414 WOBA, 260 ISO, and his weighted runs created plus there is 164. So yes, the numbers third, a little bit higher than those second, but again, either way, I'm getting a damn good ball player. So just hit the ball, Juan. Hit the ball.
Okay, so I don't want to be the dead horse on this. This is my last point on it. I understand Carson's point, and I cannot disagree with the point of you paid a guy to be the best, you put the best player in this spot. Like, I get high leverage, big time relievers. This is the situation. I get all of that. But Ibby, again, when you're talking about roughly 20 at bats, which is less than a week's worth of at bats, and then you're talking about these numbers versus these numbers, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't, like, and I understand the way that it matters. What Carson can argue is that someone else is going to take more crucial at bats than your best hitter. But if you believe in Mark Vientos the way that we believe in Mark Vientos, well, I don't know that. Look, Mark Vientos is not Soto, but Mark Vientos was a very clutch hitter last year. Mark Vientos was a very high leverage hitter last year. And he did that with not Juan Soto batting behind him, not Juan Soto of his 41 home runs and his 280 batting average and his 400 on base percentage. Mark Vientos is going to get pitches to hit, and Mark Vientos can hit good pitching. So I just don't know if it's a worthwhile argument when you're talking about, like, I'm not sitting here going, you know who should hit second? Jeff McNeil, because, 25 years ago, he was a prototypical two-hitter. I'm talking about Mark Vientos, who might also hit 35 home runs. Like, Lindor might hit 30, Vientos might hit 35, Soto might hit 40, Pete might hit 45. I don't think at that point it's going to matter who's hitting 2 or 3.
I think if there was more track record with a Vientos type, maybe this conversation can be a little bit different. But we're coming off of, the season that he had. Is he going to be able to avoid a sophomore slump? Are people going to learn how to pitch to him a little bit better? Is he going to be able to make those same in-game adjustments or in-season adjustments that he did last year? I love the fact that he's been saying all the right things so far. I love that, Mendy's come out and said that he's, he saw him working out in January with Lindor. Seems like he's ready to go. Right? Look, we love Mark Vientos. We love what he's provided. We think he could do a bunch for this team. But I understand the hesitancy of someone when they say, do I want to give at bats to Mark Vientos or do I want to give at bats to Juan Soto? It's like completely different sides of the spectrum. And I get it. So, yeah, I think that's where the ultimate disconnect comes for some people.
But what if I take it from this angle, right? Juan Soto is great, but he's 26 years old. Mark Vientos is just coming out. What is he, 25 years old, right? So they're comparable in age, but not in experience, obviously, and not in back of the baseball card.
Right.
But would you trade? Because remember, Pete Alonso probably only here for 1 year. Now, maybe we replace Pete Alonso with Vlad Guerrero Jr. Maybe. But maybe in a year from now, Mark Vientos is your first baseman. Or maybe Mark Vientos is still your third baseman, but in a year from now, he is going to hit fourth because you no longer have Pete Alonso. Or he'll hit third. Like, you're going to have to change the way the lineup is structured. Are those 20 at-bats that Juan Soto would lose over the course of a full season, are they worth the potential trade-off where you look at, can Mark Vientos take the next step in his maturation, hitting behind Lindor and in front of Soto for basically a full season, knowing that both guys are in their mid-20s and both guys are going to be here for the long haul? See, that's where I start to argue, where it's like, for this season, it just might make the most sense to give Vientos as much support as you can to be as good as he can to avoid the sophomore slump, knowing that if he has a sophomore slump, you're going to put Soto in the 2-hole anyway. Mm-hmm. So why not try to maximize what Soto could give you, knowing that next year, well, you know what? If Alonso's not on this team, then you're going to go Lindor, Soto, Vientos, or you're going to go Lindor, Soto, whoever else, and then Vientos is going to hit fourth. Like, I think that's a possibility. I think you help Vientos' maturation and you help Vientos' ability to grow into the role and avoid a slump by maybe wedging him between two elite players.
And I
think
guess
that's worth 20. Is that worth 20 at bats? To me, it is.
I think,
or at least it could be. And that's, again, why I'm not going to get up in arms about it.
And maybe, and this could be the thought process too, to help your argument as well. Maybe they're thinking, look, we're about, and I said this multiple times during the offseason, maybe we're talking about, the plan beyond where this team is now. And that involves Juan Soto at the front. That's your future. How are you going to grow with Juan Soto? Does it start this season, where you are trying to allow, because you just said similar in age, is Mark Vientos the running mate, the future running mate, true running mate of Juan Soto? So if we bat him second now, can these two, can he take that next step of becoming a consistent 30-plus home run hitter? We avoid sophomore slump. He becomes more confident. And now you've done something by batting Soto third and giving Vientos those looks to allow him to grow even more. And now you have a running mate moving forward as Lindor enters the back end of that contract down the line. Look, all of that's possible. I get where you're coming from. I've said before that I would love to see Like the idea of Mark Vientos sandwiched between the two when it comes to this offense, like him thriving there, that'd be great. I don't know if it's going to start right away, but again, mainly because I still stick with I want my guy getting the most at bats because I want to see him in the box the most. But it wouldn't shock me, as we said before, there's going to be different looks in general from opening day to the end of that first week to the first game in May or whatever it may be. We've seen guys move around. Is this going to finally be a lineup that's a little bit more steadfast when it comes to a consistent lineup? I'm not sure. Maybe if they start finding something that creates a groove, maybe you see a little bit more consistency with that 1 through 5 at some point during the season. But as always, with today's baseball, we're going to see guys move around a lot. The one who might not move around a lot is Juan Soto.
Yes, and Lindor.
And Lindor, yes. So wherever they end up going, like, they're not going to move.
You know, this is true, though, from Odd Villain. Plot twist. What if Soto says he wants to bat 9th?
Ooh. Turn the lineup over.
Wow, crazy.
That's
a hilarious comment. Look, there's something here. There's a little bit of a back and forth, which, you know, I kind of see where it's going, but I want to use this as kind of the next part of this conversation where Carson says Soto and Nimmo can, bring up the whole thing. If Soto has Nimmo behind him, Soto's elite approach gets protected even more. Carlos says, why do you say that? Isn't Vientos a better hitter than Nimmo is? Carson says, Soto and Nimmo can spit on many pitches and give Alonso pitches to hit as well. And Vientos gets protected by Winker's robot eye as well. Talking about
Soto. Yeah. Okay. So by Soto and Nimmo getting on, it forces you to pitch to Pete.
Correct. But my point would be this. If you look at the potential lineup that I threw out there as a part of this conversation where you have Lindor, Vientos, Soto. Well, in that case, you get Vientos protected by Soto's eye. Then you go to Pete, and then you have Nimmo, and you have Pete protected by Nimmo's eye, and then you have Alvarez, and then you have Alvarez protected by Winker's elite eye, where you know the guy behind that person can get on base at a very high level. So I think that's why if you have Soto 3, Nimmo 5, and then most of the time is Winker in the DH spot 7, you have a power hitter protected by a guy who has, I would say in Soto, obviously an elite eye and an elite on base tool. Nimmo, just a notch below that based on what we've seen recently where he's slowly kind of gone down in the on base percentage category, but you could see him swing back up. At one point, Nimmo was an elite eye, so I would not be surprised to see him get a little bit better in that department. And then you have Jesse Winker, who is not in their class as far as, you know, his eye and his on-base percentage, but is a very high on-base percentage guy. I think you can accomplish that a few different ways. And the reason why I don't want to get lost in the minutia of this, of a batting lineup, Ibby, but the point is, whether you do it Carson's way or you do it the way that I just outlined, the point comes back to the same thing that we started at the beginning of this conversation, which is the Mets will have a very, very, very good lineup that they can run out there. And they could take it a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I think finding that consistency is what they're going to be searching for when it comes to this 1 through 5. Yes, there's going to be different choices to go through based off of who's pitching and things of that nature. But I think, I should say, I hope relatively quickly we find a consistency within that 1 through 5 that we can run out there on a daily basis. And then the questions when it comes to lineup are more focused on 6 through 9. That's my hope. We'll see what happens. But either way, we got Juan Soto. That makes me happy.
Yes, absolutely. Let's jump back into the comments here. Maybe a bunch of comments to end the show. I think this is a good one to address kind of coming off of this, Ibby. Neither one of us are swing coaches, but
no.
He asked earlier, what do you guys think of Alvarez's new shortened swing? He has shown a swing that is more akin to a Miguel Cabrera or keep it a bit more contemporary, JD Martinez, who he obviously played with last year, where he's done something a little bit different in terms of not putting all his weight on his back foot, being a little bit more upright. And I think that if it works, it's hard when guys try to change their swing, but it's not impossible. We saw guys, you know, like Justin Turner change his swing and become a superstar. I think with a guy like Alvarez, you're looking at a swing adjustment that might look to make him more consistent. Because look, Alvarez has tremendous power. He doesn't necessarily need to sit on his back leg in a squat to generate juice. He's going to get power even if he's a little bit more upright. So if this allows him to wait a little bit longer for a fastball to travel, or if it allows him to be able to adjust to a breaking ball a bit better, to either foul it off or shoot it the other way, and that gets him a little bit more consistent. Again, I'm not a swing coach, but I don't think it's a bad idea to try it. But people who are people who are smarter than me with regards to baseball coaching seem to think that this is a good idea. So I'm not going to say it's a bad idea for all the reasons that I just outlined.
Look, I have an idea of some things when it comes to a swing, but again, I'm not one that's going to try and, critique this one too much. If he's comfortable, that's the main thing I focus on. If the guy's comfortable and he likes the results that he's getting, hopefully they can be applied in game. That's always the biggest transition. You can work on a bunch of things. It's all about applying them in real speed and real time. So I'm hopeful that those results can carry over. And the one thing I am curious about is changes being made are one thing. He had, as I mentioned last week, he had a fantastic September. The numbers he put up were promising, and now we're going to revert to some slight modification to the swing. Is that going to ultimately be for the better? Is it going to be a little bit of a setback? Like, that's the one thing to look out for, especially during the spring here, and hopefully carried over into the regular season. But either way, if he's comfortable, let's let it ride out. Let's see if it actually provide the results that we all know that a bat like Alvarez can provide.
Yeah, Zero Cool jumping in, I think, for the first time today, saying if Alvarez can get 500 at bats, he will hit over 20 home runs. And I would say,
I hope so.
With a better approach, less peaks and valleys, I think that he can hit 30 home runs. He definitely has a 30 home run bat.
Be a power hitter.
Yes.
That's it.
Correct.
Be a power hitter. Don't listen to Chavez. You don't got to bat 280.
No.
Be a power hitter. We're not telling you have to be like a complete sellout like we're talking about with Siri.
No, of course not.
Be a power hitter. Like,
because Siri,
rip.
It's funny because obviously very different players, but in order to maximize his power, Siri has to sell out. And that makes him, you could argue, obviously it makes him you can't argue this. It makes him a worse average hitter because he's just looking for pitches to absolutely hammer and pull. Alvarez has so much power, he does not have to sell out in the same regard. But to talk about the modern game of baseball, Alvarez hitting 280 and 15 home runs is not as good as Alvarez hitting 240 with 35 home runs. Who cares about the batting average? Right. Do damage, because with those 30 home runs, 35 home runs are going to come more doubles. They're going to come more, you know what I mean? Like, he will be a more complete hitter doing that than he would the other way because of what his skill set provides. It's the Pete Alonso argument, Ibby. People always said, oh, Pete is great, but he'd be a better hitter if he hit 270 instead of 240. No, he wouldn't. He's not going to hit 270 and keep up the same level of home runs. If he hit 270, he's going to hit 60 home runs.
If all times, like with this conversation, I think a lot of people also just get hung up on they think everyone can be like that Juan Soto line that I just read, where everything is like perfect and high. It's not always the case. Just because, wouldn't you rather have the guy who bats 280 but has 30 homers versus the guy who bats 240 but he has 50 homers? It's like, well, I want the 50 homers. What's the context of the lineup? What's this hitter's job? Like that's what it comes down to. And that's what I come back to when it comes to Pete. This is his best opportunity to have his best season, really, when you think about it, not only to cash in for himself for a better contract, but he can finally just go out there and be what he's supposed to be. Right. Just be a power hitter. That's it. Home runs, RBIs. That's your job. You want to bat 220? I don't give a damn. Go out there, hit when you got runners on, because you're going to get the opportunity with the guys in front of you. Hit home runs, find the seats, do it 40 times. That's what we want. That's your job. That's it.
And I think, just to clarify my point for people who have never heard me make it before, you're right. Like if you start talking about hitting 270 and hitting 40 bombs, you're talking about the best players in baseball. You're talking about the Juan Soto line. You're talking about guys who hit even for a higher average, guys like Pujols and guys like Miguel Cabrera who are going to hit over 300 and also hit a ton of bombs and stuff like that. And you have to understand where guys' limitations are. Those are, in some cases, basically in all the cases I just mentioned, all-time great players. Pete Alonso's not that. So there isn't a world where he's going to hit 270 and also hit 55 home runs. It's not going to happen. So you want him to lean into what his skill set is more. And it's not like, I know Edward is joking about this, saying, bring back Dave Kingman with the laughing emojis. But it's just like, it's not about turning people into Dave Kingman or trying to say all you got to do is hit home runs. It's about acknowledging what guys are capable of. And, a guy like Soto has shown, what he hit 288 last year and 40 home runs. Soto can hit 280 and hit 30 to 40 home runs. Pete Alonso's not going to hit 280 and hit between, hit 40 home runs. It's not going to happen because he's going to shorten up too much. He's going to slap the ball the other way. He's not going to look to do damage. And that's the kind of thing that you have to look for a person to do when that's their skill set. Also possible. Zero Cool says Alonso peaked in his rookie year. Sometimes that happens. It's also fair. When you talk about the fact that ball was juiced, he had over 50 home runs and he did have a higher batting average. The league had not adjusted to him. And again, the ball was juiced. So you can't go off of that rookie year for the fact that sometimes that happens. Guys do peak.
Well, let's hope now with the Mets being a little bit more of a prime time team. You got those games with the Dodgers on Sunday Night Baseball. Let's hope that some of those balls are juiced for those national games and these guys can put the ball over the fence. Like, I'll run with that. It's fine.
This is another good one here from Sorry, I lost it for a second. Here we go. Carlos Ramos says, the batting average is not the stat that Alonso needs to be great at. It's batting average with runners in scoring position that's important. That is a very good...
drive guys in. Yep. That's what destroyed him last year. He was awful in the clutch, and he couldn't find it. He couldn't hit his way out of a paper bag in those spots. But like this is the chance for him now to rewrite everything, because you're going to have guys, however they choose to do this lineup, you're going to have guys that get on base in front of you at a very, very high clip. Very high clip. So you got to make sure you're able to cash in. This is it, Pete. This is your chance.
Alonso hit, 34 home runs last year?
34, 35, yeah.
I think it was 34.
34.
The home run total obviously lower than what you would have liked and what he's shown he can do over the course of a full season. But you're right, Ibby. You would have taken the 34 home runs if he was better in the clutch and just had more RBI. If his RBI numbers were more in line with what his career RBI numbers were, you would have been much happier with the 34 home runs, because you would have said, you know what? Even though he's not hitting home runs, he is still driving in a ton of runs. So I think that that's another important factor here that you need to look at when you're talking about, Pete and what he is capable of and what you're looking for out of him. I just, it's all an important factor. Let's just put it that way. And thank you, Armand, saying Soto hit 288, 41 home runs with 713 plate appearances, 576 at bats. So,
and Pete last year, where was it? Where'd it go? Pete last year was 240, 34 homers, 88 RBIs. Yeah, if those 88 RBIs are a lot higher, turn 88 into 100, different story.
And look, Zero Cool, I agree. RBI are an overrated stat. I agree with that. However, when you look at Pete's numbers with runners in scoring position and with men on base, based on his career line, he should have had more RBI because he had a tremendous amount of opportunities and he was so bad at it. So yes, overrated stat. It is based on what other people do a lot of the times. But in this case, Ibby, look, I always say on the show, there is no stat you can disqualify immediately. There is no stat you could throw out. I understand why people devalue batting average and RBIs. I understand why people devalue wins for pitchers, but you can't throw them out completely. And I think this is the perfect example as to why, because you could acknowledge that over the landscape of baseball, RBIs have become an overrated stat. But I think when you look at Pete Alonso's 2024 year, I would say that him having a down year in RBI tells the whole story of his season.
Yeah.
More so even than the power, because no one had more opportunities than Pete did, and he consistently was horrendous in those opportunities. So to say it's like, oh, it's an overrated stat, yeah, that's fine. But I also think you have to acknowledge the full picture, which is there's a little bit more than meets the eye here, because Pete had plenty of chances. He didn't have 88 RBI because he was coming up in non-RBI opportunities. He had 88 RBI because he was coming up in RBI opportunities and was failing.
Yeah, we got Carson coming here also saying how 1 out of the 34 home runs were in a high leverage situation. That's, again, it was a rough year.
Not
rough
good
year.
enough. Yeah.
Not good enough. This year, I expect Pete to have upwards of, 120 RBIs. That's what I'm expecting. Right. So a big boon, if you will, from the RBI department for Pete, because it has to happen. With the things that are going to be happening in front of him, he needs to cash in. And I think he will.
Yeah, Douglas Barnes saying, how the hell is RBI an overrated stat? Last I checked, you needed to score runs to win. I know this was not to us. This was more to Zero, but I think it's an overrated individual stat. Obviously, I'm using Zero Cool's word. I wouldn't say it's an overrated stat. I would say it's an inflated stat. It does not tell the story that people think it tells. But again, in the situation of Pete Alonso in 2024, I think it tells the exact story that people like, the most important story that needs to be told, which was, yes, Pete was not good in high leverage situations, whether it was home run department or it was RBI department. So I do think a good observation though, from Douglas saying, you do need to score runs to win. Certainly. One thing, Ibby, Pete Alonso last year, I think was first or second. I think he might've been first in maximum exit velocity.
Okay.
But he was like 12th or 15th, 17th in average exit velocity. So when you look at that disparity, that's an issue too. That means when Pete really mashed one, he absolutely crushed it. Top exit velocity, max exit velocity, he was Pete Alonso. But when you look at how often he did crush them, he was, let's just say, 15th in the league, which is not. That's a big step off. I think I think it's 1 in 12, but I could be wrong. Could have been like 2 in 15, but the point remains the same.
I mean, you heard David Stearns say in his presser, as we're starting to wrap up here, you heard David Stearns in his presser talking about, the Alonso talks and how he feels, that being Alonso, about what his season was. And then Stearns echoed, he didn't think that, he thinks Pete just had a rough season. He didn't equate it to the contract or things like that. I do think it did come down to that a little bit. But sometimes, especially in baseball, you just can't get out of your own way and you can't find it. And that was the year for Pete. But like I said, he's hungry. Stearns echoed that. Like I said, Stearns doesn't lie. He's going to come in here with a purpose. He knows what's in front of him. He knows he's taking the spot of, like, there's always been the comps with him and Judge that have been misplaced and improper. The home runs we can talk about all we want, but as an overall player, there's a huge disparity between the two. And I still think that Pete's going to look at this as an opportunity to say, I get to play with Juan Soto now, and I'm going to show you that I am a damn good player and that I can protect him and that I am going to provide for this team and push us forward to higher expectations and higher heights, even than 2024 here in 2025. So I think that that's going to be his overall motivation. And I hope to God, he can come through on all those things. And he has a banner season, hits 40 plus home runs with 120 RBIs.
This comment from Zero Cool: with 2 out and runners in scoring position, Pete hit 239 last year. He hit 240 overall. What's the problem? He was the same hitter. Respectfully, that's not the way to interpret that. It's not, because he didn't rise. If he was the same hitter, that's the problem. He had a down year and he was worse in the big spots. He was not the guy who he had been before, where he knocked in more runs. Like, he was not that guy. I think the fact that he was worse when things got more important tells you the story you need to know. Ibby, let's hit these 3 real quick before we get out of here. Rosie saying, I can't believe the article from Sherman critiquing the Mets because they didn't do what the Yankees did this offseason. The anti-Mets bias is so pronounced. Just overall thoughts on that. A lot of people have been, critical or tongue-in-cheek or have a lot of jokes to make about, with regards to how the Mets handled the offseason. I think that's insane.
I don't care what other people say. My team is spending money and the problem with the offseason this year was because the lack of teams. If Jeff Passan wants to put out articles as well, talking about how the Mets were spending more money than X amount of teams combined, I don't care. The Mets aren't the problem. Every other team is the problem. Your billionaire owners spend your money. I don't pay. That was Rosie. Sorry, Rosie. I don't pay for that rag of the Post or whatever it is that he writes for. So I'm not going to, I'll click on an article from time to time, but when I see, oh, this is Post Plus, like, I'm not paying you a dime. So I just exit out of it. And I don't care because those that say, whether it's them, whether it's the Passan article on ESPN Plus, whether it's Foul Territory talk, or whether it's Harold Reynolds talking on The Fan about nonsense, like, I don't care. And I'll use this as my closing point. I don't care when it comes to, what others are saying at this point, because in-house, this team knows what they're doing. They are building to the point that was made earlier. You hear David Stern speak, you know that this team's in the right hands. Like, that's what I care about. The ones that are in-house, the fans that are watching closely on the day-to-day, they know what's real and what's not. You don't have to listen to people that just peek in and think they have an idea of what's going on because they don't know shit. Focus on your team, focus on what you love, and allow the noise out there. Let it play. Don't pay it any mind.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. I mean, Andre even saying, how can anybody critique the Mets? They didn't get Sasaki and Cease and Scott. What a joke. Like, yeah, it's nonsense because these folks are doing things to get a rise out of you. They are doing things to sell, papers. And by that, I mean subscriptions to their, online New York Post Plus.com or whatever bullshit. I don't know why anybody would pay for an article in 2025, especially if I tweeted this the other day, but it's the truth. Like, why would you pay a subscription fee to read articles from a known rag in a dying medium in 2025 when you could just not do all of that? Like, it's just insane. But they're doing it to get a rise. Like, look, Jeff Passan is a great reporter. He is so locked in. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Jeff Passan. But, Jeff Passan also has to sometimes write the articles that he has to write, right? Maybe being so plugged into the league, maybe he's got to pay the piper.
Jeff Needles, and Jeff Passan's an extremely smart guy. When you watch him on John Boy, like he knows, like he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He's a smart guy. He's in it. He knows exactly when he says something, what's going to carry. So I have no beef with Jeff. I only have beef with Jeff over one specific thing that I don't have to mention on air. It's not towards me, but it's just something that he said one time about the Mets that really bothered me. But outside of that, like, I know what he's doing. I get what he's doing. Like, when he goes on with Buster Olney, I know what he's doing when he's talking about the Soto contract. I get it. Like, I'm not going to run down Jeff Passan. Jeff's the king. He's up here. He's number one.
He's great.
The guy. But everyone else, like, I know what you're doing and you're shit. Like, I don't need to listen to you because you don't know what you're talking about. Jeff Passan knows what he's talking about for the most part. But everyone else, I know what you're doing, and I don't need it. I don't need your negativity. I don't need your nonsense. I don't want it.
I get that. I was just going to say, to the point of, like, he's so connected in baseball that every once in a while does he have to write the article that, like, Major League Baseball wants him to write, which is like, can you believe how much the Mets are spending compared to these other teams?
Yeah.
And like, that's
fine,
like,
I'll write it. Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit of,
yeah.
I hate to use this because he's a great reporter and it's a sort of derogatory statement, but, like, carrying the water for MLB. Like, does he have to do the commissioner's bidding?
He does.
A better way to put it. I don't think he does.
He doesn't carry water. Christopher Mad Dog Russo on High Heat.
Oh,
he
my
carried
God.
Water. He carries water. He carries water for Major League Baseball, and that show's defunct now. It's done. But he's the definition of carrying water. Passing, not so much.
No, that's fair. I was asking the question rather than insinuating that he did. But yeah, like a lot of people, people saying Russo's a boob, Andy Martino is terrible. Thank God High Heat is gone. Busteroni is terrible. This is my favorite one. John Heyman is a cuck. Odd Villain also saying, I fucks with Sal Licata. He reminds me of a construction worker from Queens. I disagree. He sounds like he could be a construction worker from Queens, but I don't like Sal. Me and Sal also have like a personal beef, so that just is what it is.
Oh my God.
Armand saying Passon and Rosenthal are my favorites, but don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, Heyman is a cuck.
I did make a meme that has that. If Odd, I'll send it to you anywhere. I'll send you a private message. The hilarious meme that I made with that same statement on it with John Heyman, who blocked me for it, but whatever.
Yeah, listen, it's like
you call someone that, you're done. Like I get it, it's fun. So
yeah. If you're gonna go out, that's a good way.
I'm gonna go out that way.
Yeah. Ibby, this has been a lot of fun. I already can't wait to do it next week. This is a fun time of year. Celebrate the return of baseball. Don't let people look. I know the cliche is that hope springs eternal, and it doesn't matter if you're the Dodgers or you're the White Sox, right? Like if you're a fan of either one of those teams, everybody has a reason to get excited when baseball is back and baseball is around the corner. And so, if you're a fan of the Mets, you have a lot to be excited about. You got Juan fucking Soto on your team. They brought back Pete Alonso in order to bolster this lineup. You have young players you can get excited about if that's your thing. You have, interesting options in the starting rotation that I think can excite you in Clay Holmes and, the return of Kodai Senga, and can Sean Manaea continue it and take that next step? Can David Peterson take that next step? And then you have a really, really, really good bullpen. So you have so much to be excited about. So don't let anybody, whether it's John Heyman, whether it's
Joel Sherman,
Sal Licata, Joel Sherman, Buster Olney,
Harold Reynolds,
Keith McPherson, who shouldn't even have a fucking job. That guy's terrible. Don't let those people rain on your parade, because baseball lives for this moment right now. The Mets are coming off of a wonderful season. I think they're on their way to a second wonderful season. I don't want to jump the gun, but we'll see where it finishes. But the Mets are building something, and you should be excited. You should be excited every year because spring training is great, but you should be extra excited because you have Steve Cohen, you have David Stearns, you have Carlos Mendoza, you have people you can trust that are aligned, that believe in this team. You should believe in this team. Don't listen to anybody else. And with that said, I'm John. That's Ibby. This is Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter every single week, Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. You can catch us. If you missed the show, go ahead and watch anything you missed as soon as we're done in the next couple seconds. If you can't watch, don't worry. We'll drop this as an audio podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all of those places starting tomorrow. And if you haven't already, like the video on your way out and subscribe to the channel. Til Mets Do Us Part. We will see you next week.